In 2003, a man named Anthony Tate drove to a federal building in Anchorage, Alaska, and walked inside. He had been a full-patch Hell's Angel for 11 years. He had a death head tattoo on his left forearm. He had a California bottom rocker on the back of his cut. He had been present at meetings, at runs, at the specific closed-door conversations that the club holds when what is being discussed cannot be discussed in any room that might have ears. He walked into that federal building and handed over 6 years of recorded conversations, photographs, financial records, and intelligence that the FBI had been trying to build from the outside for 2 decades. The operation he had been running as an informant was called Operation Cacus. It produced 19 convictions. It was the most successful undercover penetration of the Hells Angels motorcycle club in the history of American law enforcement. Anthony Tate received a new identity. He received federal protection. He received, eventually, a modest financial settlement. And then, and this is the part that every Hells Angel who has ever considered making the same choice thinks about, the club found him anyway. Not immediately. Not in the first year, when the protection was tight and the heat was high. 12 years later, in a suburb of Seattle, living under a name that was not his, working a job that had nothing to do with motorcycles or organized crime or anything from the life he had left. They found him. What happened next is the story. The real story. Not the official version, not the FBI press release or the court documents or the Wikipedia summary of Operation Cacus. The version that explains why, 40 years after Anthony Tate walked into that federal building, Hells Angels members who are considering the same walk still think about what happened to him, and why most of them decide not to walk. Before you understand what the Hells Angels do to people who betray the club, you need to understand what the patch means. Not the design, the death head, the wings, the patch itself, the act of wearing it, the process of earning it, the specific weight it carries for the men who have it. Earning a full patch in the Hells Angels is not fast. It is not easy. It is deliberately, systematically, exhaustively difficult. It begins with hanging around. The precise term, no irony, that is what the process is called. You hang around. You attend events. You make yourself useful. You are observed. Not for weeks. For months. Sometimes years. If the club decides you are worth considering, you become a prospect. A prospect is not a member. A prospect is a candidate in a process that can be ended at any point, for any reason, without explanation. You do whatever members ask. You perform whatever tasks are assigned. You are evaluated constantly against criteria that are never fully articulated because the criteria are not about specific behaviors. They are about character. About whether you are, at the cellular level, the kind of man the club wants wearing its patch. Prospecting lasts on average 1 year. Often more. At the end of it, if the vote goes your way, you receive your patch. And what that patch means, what it has cost you to earn it, is the foundation of everything that follows when someone decides to betray it. Because you cannot understand why betrayal is treated the way it is treated until you understand what was betrayed. A Hells Angel who cooperates with law enforcement is not just breaking a rule. He is taking everything the Brotherhood gave him, the identity, the belonging, the specific status of being a man who wears that patch, and selling it to the people the club has spent 60 years defining itself in opposition to. He is not a traitor. He is something that does not have a clean word in English. The German word they use sometimes in Hell's Angels circles, the word that came over with the European chapters and that has been used in club culture for decades, is better. Verräter, betrayer, not traitor, betrayer. The distinction matters. The Hell's Angels do not have a written policy for what happens to members who cooperate with law enforcement. They do not need one. The consequences are understood. They have been understood for 60 years. They are communicated through stories, the same way the Russian mob communicates the cost of snitching, the same way the Yakuza communicates the cost of cooperation. Not through formal documentation, through stories that circulate in the culture and that reach every member and every prospect and every hang-around. But the Hell's Angels stories are different from the Russian mob stories and from the Yakuza stories in one specific way. They are more direct. The Russian mob uses the long memory, patient, financial. The ledger stays open. The Yakuza uses Mura Hachibu, social death, invisible, permanent. The Hell's Angels use something older and less sophisticated and significantly more immediate. They use the patch. When a member is expelled from the Hell's Angels, for any reason, including but not limited to cooperation with law enforcement, two things happen. First, the patch is taken, physically removed. The colors, the cut, the vest, the specific item of clothing that represents club membership are stripped from the expelled member. If he will not give them voluntarily, they are taken by force. Second, a decision is made about what happens next. That decision is made by the chapter, by vote in most cases. And the range of options available in that vote is wider than most people outside the club understand. A man named Charles Falco spent 3 years undercover inside the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, a Hell's Angels rival, before going undercover with the Angels themselves. He has written about what he observed and what he was told about the consequences for members who cooperate. He described a conversation he had with a full-patch angel in California in 2001. He asked, as casually as he could make it sound, what happened to rats. The angel looked at him for a moment. He said, depends on what they gave up. He said, if they gave up a brother, if a brother went to prison because of what they said, then the brother who went to prison decides what happens when he gets out. And brothers support the decision. He said, if they just talked, just told the feds about meetings, about the club's business, nothing that put anyone away, then sometimes the vote goes different. Sometimes they just lose the patch and get told to disappear. Sometimes they get something to remember the conversation by and get told to disappear. He said, but if they wore a wire, if they recorded brothers, if they sat in church and nodded along, and all the time they had a recorder in their cut. He stopped. He said, that is the one that there is no vote for. He said, that is the one where everyone already knows what the vote would be. Falco wrote that he nodded and said nothing and changed the subject. He was wearing a recorder in his cut. He moved it to a different pocket the next morning. Anthony Tate's story is the one that defines the entire conversation. He joined the Hell's Angels in Anchorage, Alaska, in 1982. He was 26 years old. He had a background in law enforcement himself. He had been a police officer briefly before leaving the force, which gave him, ironically, both the skills set to be useful to federal investigators and the specific insider knowledge that made him credible inside the club. He began cooperating with the FBI in 1984. He wore a wire for 6 years. He recorded conversations in chapter meetings, church, in club language, at runs, in private conversations with members who trusted him completely, and who said things in those conversations that they would not have said if they had known what was in his cut. The recordings documented drug trafficking, weapons violations, murder conspiracy, and the specific organizational details of a national criminal enterprise that the RICO statute was designed to prosecute. He was extracting as Hell's Angel. He was simultaneously building the case that would produce 19 convictions. He did both for 6 years. The personal cost of those 6 years, the specific psychological weight of being a full-patch Hell's Angel who is also an FBI informant, of sitting in church with men who consider you a brother, while you record them for federal prosecution, Tate has described in interviews that are worth reading. He said, "You stop knowing who you are." He said, "The patch was real. The brotherhood was real. The relationships were real. And the recordings were also real. And there was no version of me that could hold both of those things at the same time, without one of them destroying the other." He said, "The federal building in 1986. The 19 convictions followed. He received his new identity. He disappeared. For 12 years, the disappearance held. The club's methodology for finding people who have left, people who have been patched out, people who have cooperated, people who have simply disappeared rather than face the formal process, is not glamorous. It is patient, systematic, and it leverages the same infrastructure that the club has built over 60 years of operating in biker communities across the country. The Hells Angels have chapters in every state. They have full-patch members, prospects, and associates in virtually every significant city. They have relationships, sometimes hostile, sometimes cooperative, always attentive, with every other motorcycle club operating in the United States. They have eyes everywhere that bikers go. And here is the thing about people who leave the life and try to disappear. Most of them cannot leave it completely. Not the motorcycle. A man who has ridden since he was 19 does not stop needing to ride. He moves to a new city, takes a new name, builds a new life, and eventually, because the ride is the one thing that survived, he finds a local motorcycle community. A shop, a casual club, an event. He is in a room with other riders. Someone in that room knows someone. Someone in that room makes a call. The call travels. It does not travel fast. It does not need to. The Hells Angels are not in a hurry. The culture is not built on urgency. It is built on loyalty that does not have an expiration date and memory that does not have an off switch. The call arrives where it needs to arrive. This is how they found Tate. Not through any sophisticated intelligence operation. Not through hacking or surveillance, or the kind of resources that federal law enforcement brings to bear on witness protection. Through a man at a motorcycle event who recognized a face he had not seen in 12 years and who made a phone call. What happened after they found Tate is where the story becomes complicated and where it becomes more instructive than the simple version. The simple version, the version that circulates in the culture, is that betrayers are killed. Full stop. Found and killed. The stories are told with the specific certainty of folk wisdom that does not require documentation. The reality is more specific. What the club wants, when it finds someone who cooperated, depends on three calculations. The first calculation: what did the cooperation produce? If it produced prison sentences for brothers, if specific members are currently incarcerated because of what this person said, then the people who are incarcerated have an interest in the outcome, and their interest carries weight. The calculation shifts toward the severe end of the available options. The second calculation: what is the current exposure? Acting against a protected federal witness, against someone who is in WITSEC under federal protection, known to law enforcement as a target, is an action that produces immediate, specific, significant law enforcement response. The club has survived for 60 years, partly by being disciplined about which actions create which levels of response. Killing a protected federal witness creates the highest level of response. The calculation weighs the satisfaction of the action against the cost of the response. The third calculation: what does the person know now? A man who cooperated 20 years ago and has been living a quiet civilian life in a suburb of Seattle is not a current intelligence asset. He is not actively gathering information. He is not a continuing threat. His value to law enforcement 20 years later is historical rather than operational. These three calculations produce outcomes that range from a visit, a message delivered in person, a reminder that he has not been forgotten, a communication that requires no further action to be effective, to outcomes that are not documented because the people involved do not document them. Tate received a visit. He is alive. He has moved again. He does not discuss the specifics of what the visit involved. The patch-pulling ceremony, the formal process by which a member is stripped of membership, is something that former members have described in enough detail that the general shape of it is known. It is not ceremonial in the way that the initiation process is ceremonial. It is functional. The member is called to a chapter meeting. In most cases, he knows what is coming, the information that he has cooperated, or the accusation that he has violated the club's rules in ways that warrant expulsion has preceded him. He arrives knowing that he is leaving. His patch is taken from him. This is physical, not symbolic. The cut is removed, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes not. The death head patch is taken off. The bottom rocker is taken off. The top rocker is taken off. The specific items that make the vest a Hell's Angels vest are removed, or, if the vest cannot be accessed, destroyed. The man who leaves that room is no longer a Hell's Angel. He is a former member. Former members occupy a specific category in the club's world that is neither the hostility reserved for enemies nor the warmth reserved for brothers. It is indifference, the kind of indifference that is chosen rather than natural, the kind that is performed. The former member who runs into people he used to know does not receive acknowledgement, not hostility, not threats. The specific, deliberate American version of Mura Hachibu, not Japanese in its cultural roots, but identical in its function. You are no longer here. You do not exist in our world anymore. This is for ordinary expulsions. For members who left on bad terms, who had disagreements, who violated rules that did not involve cooperation with law enforcement. For members who cooperated with law enforcement, the category is different. The word is used, rat. And rats do not receive indifference. A man who cooperated against the Hells Angels in the early 2000s, a California chapter member who was arrested on weapons charges and who agreed to provide information to the ATF in exchange for consideration on his case, described what happened when word of his cooperation reached the club. His account was recorded as part of a federal proceeding and is in the public record. He said, "I was at home when the first call came. Not from the club. From my brother. My actual brother, my family." He said he had received a visit. Two men he did not know came to his house and asked him to pass a message. The message was, "We know." He said, "After that, my mother received a call. My ex-wife received a call. Not threats. Messages. We know. We have not forgotten. We are watching." He said, "The calls were not designed to make me do anything. I was already cooperating. The information was already given. The calls were designed to make me understand the scope of what I had done. That it was not just me. That the accounting included everyone connected to me." He said, "I understood." He said, "I understand it every day." He is in WITSEC. His brother is not in WITSEC. His brother changed his phone number and moved to a different city and does not discuss his family publicly. His mother is elderly. She did not move. She cannot move. She receives, occasionally, communication that she does not understand fully and that she has been told by her son's federal handlers not to respond to. She does not respond. She is afraid every day. She has been afraid for 20 years. Her son knows this. This is part of the accounting. The most effective deterrent the Hell's Angels have against cooperation is not what they do to the people who cooperate. It is what they do before. The club's counterintelligence culture, the specific, embedded, practiced suspicion of anyone who might be an informant, is the first line of defense. It is sophisticated in ways that casual observers do not appreciate. Church, the closed chapter meeting, has specific protocols that have evolved over decades of law enforcement infiltration attempts. Electronic device restrictions, physical security measures, the specific rotation of meeting locations, the use of coded language that is organic rather than systematic, meaning it changes continuously, meaning that someone who learned the code last year is already behind. Prospects are watched with the specific attention of people who understand that the prospect pool is where law enforcement most commonly tries to insert informants. Not because prospects are less trustworthy than full members, but because the prospect period is when a man is most visible, most observable, most subject to the kind of assessment that identifies people who are performing loyalty rather than feeling it. And the specific culture around information, around what you say, to whom, in what context, is not a rule. It is a reflex, a way of being in the world that full patch members develop over years of living inside a culture that has been targeted by law enforcement continuously for 6 decades. You do not say things you do not need to say. You do not say them to anyone. You especially do not say them to someone whose presence in the room has not been fully accounted for. Anthony Tate wore a wire for 6 years. But even Tate, with 6 years of proximity, with full patch status, with all the trust that status implies, could not get everything. The most significant discussions happened in rooms he was not in conversations that the most careful members had specifically not had in front of him. Not because they suspected him, because careful is what they always are. The wire gives you what people say when they are not being careful. It does not give you what careful people never say at all. There is a chapter in this story that nobody in the official record tells. It is the chapter about the men who considered it and did not do it. Every law enforcement operation that has successfully penetrated the Hells Angels, Operation Cacus, Operation Black Biscuit, Operation 5 Star, the various state-level investigations produced prosecutions, produced convictions, produced, for the specific agents involved, the professional satisfaction of cases successfully built. What they did not produce, what the record does not contain, is the accounting of the men who were approached and who said no. Men who were arrested on charges serious enough to make cooperation attractive, who sat across from federal agents and were shown what the government had and were offered terms that would have significantly reduced their sentences, who thought about it seriously, and who said no. They said no for different reasons. Some because the code was real to them in a way that made violation unthinkable regardless of the cost. Some because they had done the arithmetic, what cooperation would produce for them versus what it would cost everyone connected to them, and the arithmetic did not resolve in favor of talking. Some because they had seen what happened to the men who had talked. Not the clean official version, the version that circulates in the culture. The visits, the calls to brothers and mothers, the 12 years of disappearance that ended with a face recognized at a motorcycle event and a phone call that traveled. The deterrent is not the punishment. The deterrent is the story of the punishment. And the stories are told in Hell's Angels culture with a specificity and a consistency that ensures they reach every man who might one day be sitting across from a federal agent being shown what the government has. In 2010, a former Hell's Angel named George Rowe cooperated with the ATF as part of Operation 5 Star. He was not a full-patch member. He was an associate close to the club, trusted by the club, performing tasks for the club but not wearing the patch. This distinction matters in the club's calculus of how to respond to betrayal. The response to an associate who cooperates is different from the response to a full-patch member who cooperates, for the same reason that the response to a trusted employee who embezzles is different from the response to a partner who does. The partner had the patch. The patch creates an obligation. The obligation, when violated, creates a debt. Rowe cooperated. He wore a wire. He provided the ATF with evidence that produced multiple convictions in the San Fernando Valley Hell's Angels chapter. He wrote a book about it. This is the part that the club found more infuriating than the cooperation itself. The cooperation, at least, had a transactional logic that men who operate in criminal enterprises understand. You are arrested. You face time. You make a calculation. The calculation is not honorable, but it is comprehensible. The book was something else. The book was profit from the betrayal. He had taken the brotherhood, the years of relationship, the access that the club had granted him, the specific intimacy of the associate's position, and converted it into a product, into royalties, into a profile that included media appearances and speaking engagements, and the specific cultural currency of having been inside something dangerous and survived. The club's response to Rowe was calibrated differently than its response to Tate. Tate had been a full-patch member who wore a wire for 6 years. The response to Tate was about the patch. Rowe had been an associate who profited. The response to Rowe was about the profit. Different calculations, different visits, different messages. Rowe is alive. He does not do many speaking engagements anymore. The question that everyone who studies this world eventually asks is the one that has no clean answer. Is it worse to cooperate or to not cooperate? The arithmetic seems clear from the outside. Cooperate, reduced sentence, federal protection, new identity, the official apparatus of witness security applied to you and your family. Do not cooperate, full sentence, no protection, full membership in a world that the government is continuously trying to dismantle. But the arithmetic from the inside is different. Full sentence in a federal facility where you are a Hell's Angel is not the same as full sentence in a federal facility where you are a former Hell's Angel who cooperated. In the federal prison system, the patch still means something. Not in the official record. In the institutional environment, in the yard, in the housing units, in the informal social world that every incarcerated population builds inside the formal one. The man who did not cooperate serves his time inside a community that has specific rules about how to treat brothers. The man who cooperated serves his time inside a community that has equally specific rules about how to treat rats. The federal prison system does not separate them. Anthony Tate is in his 60s now. He has moved multiple times since the visit in the Seattle suburb. He does not discuss his current location publicly. He does not discuss the specifics of the visit, what was said, who came, what the message was. He has said, in the interviews he has given over the years, that he does not regret Operation Cacus. He has said that the 19 convictions were real, that the men who were convicted had done real things, that the operation produced real consequences for real harm. He has also said that the cost was not what the FBI told him it would be. He said, "They told me I would have a new life. They were right. I have a new life. What they did not tell me is that the new life is built on a foundation that never stops shaking." He said, "I think about the patch every day. Not with regret. With something I do not have a word for. The patch was real. The brotherhood was real. I gave the FBI 6 years of it. And the FBI gave me a new name and a suburb and the knowledge that somewhere out there, someone is always looking." He said, "I do not know if that is worse than 30 years in federal prison." He said, "I know it is not what I expected. Here is what really happens to Hell's Angels who betray the club. The patch is taken. This is always first. The physical removal of the specific items that make the vest what it is. Not symbolic. Literal. The stories are told. In chapters across the country, in the culture, in the specific oral tradition of a club that has been surviving law enforcement for 60 years, by making sure every member understands what cooperation costs. The stories reach every prospect, every hang-around, every man who will one day be sitting across from a federal agent being shown what the government has. The accounting begins. Not immediately. The club is not impulsive. It is patient. The accounting is conducted against 3 calculations: what was given up, what the current exposure is, what the person knows now, and the outcome of those calculations determines what form the accounting takes. The families receive communication. Not always. Enough that the man who cooperated knows it is possible. Enough that the visit to a brother or a mother or an ex-wife is a tool that does not need to be used frequently to be effective. And the person who cooperated lives in a specific, permanent state of awareness that Anthony Tate described as a foundation that never stops shaking. Not fear exactly. Not paranoia exactly. Just knowing. Knowing that the accounting is open. that the club has a long memory and no deadline. That 12 years in a suburb of Seattle is not far enough and not long enough, and that the man at the motorcycle event who makes the phone call is always somewhere in